Hello, I'm Thomas Haire, Chief Content Officer of the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI Brand Response Council. These 20-ish minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world, speaking about the hottest topics in the industry, and we're talking about hot topics like summer today, are scheduled twice a month. Before we get to today's conversation, though, a housekeeping note. We'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of the session. You do not have to wait to ask them, however. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the episode. As we said, we're on the verge of summer. It's time to grab a chair, a book, and while away the days poolside or in the sand. But sometimes those hazy, lazy beach day books and beach books can run together. Sometimes you want to read something a little bit more edgy or more inspiring. The good news is this group has you covered. Today, Take 20 host and PDMI Brand Response Council Chair Chris Foster at Modern Postcard heads this fine group of PDMI Council members who will share recent reads that push them to improve as business experts, leaders, and people. With us today are Carey Chase, Senior Vice President of Media at Modus Direct, Eileen Fraser, President and CEO of Intelligent Handshake, Haire, Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Cannella Media DTC, and Gregory Silvano, CEO of Buyist. We're still also hoping to see Sean Robertson, Vice President of Direct to Scale at NBCU, in this virtual event. He is stuck in real world traffic, and we hope to see him by the end of it. So without further ado, Chris, please take it away.
Great, thank you so much, and welcome summer. Welcome everybody, and thank you for sharing these books, right? I mean, I think that we get a chance to work with each other as professionals, but we're also people, and we work with each other as people who are interested in ideas, people who are interested in growing themselves. And so this is just an opportunity for us to share the kinds of things that we're reading and the kinds of things that are helping us grow as people and professionals, because in our industry and oftentimes in the demands that our profession has of us, the intertwining of the career and your life seems to be really tight. And so oftentimes if you read a book that helps you in your life, it can help you in your career and vice versa. So thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to kick it off with one of my favorite books that I've read this year. It's called Super Communicators, and it's by a guy named Charles Duhigg. Charles Duhigg wrote a book called The Power of Habit years and years ago, and massive success about kind of how you break your habits down. Super Communicators is a look into how people speak with one another, and more importantly, how the best conversations can happen and unfold if someone's paying attention to what kind of conversation you're having. And what I liked about this book was that he didn't say, you know, great conversationalists are born, right? They're not made. Sometimes there are, you know, innate skills and intuition that people have naturally, but having a great conversation is something you can learn. There are skills to having a great conversation. There are certain practices that if you think about, you can deploy in a conversation to make that other people, to make the other person or people feel comfortable. And suddenly you start going into more meaningful conversations because you're allowing those other folks to be vulnerable to express their thoughts and feelings. And so I love this book, and I love some of the ideas and techniques on a very high level. He said there are basically three kinds of conversations out there. There's a social conversation, a practical conversation, and an emotional conversation. And you don't necessarily know what kind of conversation you're having until you start. Oftentimes, as we all know, in the conferences at PDMI East or West, you're talking and it's practical. What do you do? Oh, I'm in direct response. I do this, I do that. I'm in marketing or however. And then it can move very quickly to a social conversation. Oh, did you see the game last night? Or, oh, you grew up in Los Angeles. I spent some time there and I enjoyed it. So it can move to social. And then sometimes it can move to an emotional conversation if those people let it. So it really is paying attention to what kind of conversation you're having with that other person. Most importantly, what kind of conversation that other person wants to have. And that way you can lean into what they're thinking about so that they feel comfortable in that conversation space with you. And that's another tie into a big high level idea is called matching. You try to match what that person is thinking about and talking about and reflect that back to them, not in a way to manipulate, but in a way to make them, again, feel comfortable so you're both having the same kind of conversation that they expect. I think we've all met people who have, come in and been super aggressive. And then if you start being really passive or drifty, they're like, no, aggressive. And if you start matching kind of like a clipped aggressive tone or focused on what they're thinking about, and then you kind of can soften the conversation down a little bit once they feel comfortable and once they feel like they're being heard. So anyway, I highly recommend it. Charles Duhigg, Super Communicators, How to Unlock the Secret Power of Communication. So that's mine. So Carey, I'm going to toss it off to you.
All right. So mine is also a nonfiction, but it's called Get the Picture. And it is written by Bianca Bosker, who wrote a book about 7 years ago called Cork Dork. And that was kind of delving into the world of wine and what makes people so obsessed about wine. And this takes a similar take, but it's about the art world. And in particular, it's about New York and why do some people will spend their entire life just trying to pursue, this vaulted status of being an artist. And it's actually kind of investigative. She takes on different roles at a gallery and then also at the Guggenheim as a security person. So all these entry-level jobs just to not only understand the why, but also to develop her eye and kind of really understand art, because as she progresses, it becomes pretty evident, and I'm not giving anything away because really what's delightful about the book is it's very funny, and it also kind of peels away the layers of what makes the art world. And even what they said, there was a phrase that said that you don't really, that what it inhabits this world that a lot of people can't even access it and understand it, and that's what makes it intriguing for other people. And they kind of want to keep it that way. It's this exclusive little club that even the gallerist says, I don't know if you're cool enough. And these are adults. This is not high school. As we all know, adult world and high school is not that different in the big scheme of things. So it's just a really joyful, and one of the reasons why I really wanted to read this book is I've always had this dalliance of like, and that's part of the reason why I'm in advertising. It's kind of business, but there's an art. We often use art and science, and kind of you can do the math, but you can also appreciate the script, and you want to push, and you really kind of want to get that eye. And on ours, it's a little bit more commercial, pardon the pun, but here it's really getting into that, nitty gritty New York art world, which is elusive, but also kind of entertaining. And as she comes to find, sometimes the people that think they're the coolest aren't necessarily always the coolest. So, and it's called Get the Picture. Bianca Bosker is the author, and I think it makes it, and there are no pictures. So I got I was going to get the Kindle version, but I wanted to see some of the artwork that she was referring to. And there isn't anything, which is great because it's.
That's funny.
There you go.
So quick question for you, Carey. Are you going to see some art this summer?
I know that. Well, I live in Chicago, so the Art Institute, and there is actually, I believe, there are some exhibits that I haven't been there in forever. So yes, I definitely think that it's in my future. And now knowing this, I may even make some art. I've been taking some photography classes, so watch out. I'm maybe in a black turtleneck next time you see me.
That's awesome. You can definitely be the coolest kid on the panel.
I'm already planning it. I have right. I know their secret language now. So
excellent. Eileen, what are you going to recommend to the folks in the audience?
Sure. Well, the book I wanted to talk about today that I read this year, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. Now this, unlike Carey's book, this is an older book. It was published in 1952. And the reason Peale wrote this is he saw a study of 600 university students in psychology courses, and the result of the study was that students were asked their most difficult personal problem. and 75% listed lack of confidence. So he decided to combat that issue. And I looked at current studies, and self-doubt continues to be one of the top issues for personal problems, particularly for young people. But I love this book because he goes into very practical solutions. For instance, people who worry can take simple actions like mentally tossing their worries overboard. You know, I've cruised a lot in my day, and I love that analogy of you're on a ship, just throw them overboard. And he goes deeper as well. He talks about a lack of inner peace is due to some extent to the effect of noise on the nervous system, and that noise is very draining. It's like an emotional upheaval. He says hate blocks energy, and it drains that energy from your system. And the more you lose yourself in something bigger than yourself, the more energy you will have. So it's about alignment with that source. He has a formula, 3 steps. The first one is prayerize, which is talk to your higher power, whatever you believe is your higher power. The second is picturize, and the basic factor in physics is force. So the way you energize that force is, in psychology, it is a realizable wish. So you actually picturize your wish and print the picture of it on your mind as it's happening and continue to surrender to the picture. But the real magic is the third step, and that is you must believe that you have it. So it's 3 simple steps, apply it to anything. In the book, he has a chapter called Stop Fuming and Fretting, which I kind of like, and he has 2 stories. So the first one is how to get a team to work together, and it's a coach for a championship university rowing crew. And the coach for this crew, the way he got them to be champions is he told them to win any race, row slowly, which to me was kind of counterintuitive, right? But his point was the rapid rowing tends to break the stroke of the team. And when you break the stroke, it's with great difficulty to get the team to be in sync again. And the rhythm of this team is necessary to win. So his total approach and the way they won was to go fast, row slowly. And I kind of take this as a team that's working together. It's great to have a star, but you really want everybody to win. And, you know, if everybody's in the same boat, kind of working together, it's much more wonderful than if you're, working against someone or trying to best someone. The last thing I want to talk about is my favorite story. And there was it's also a sports analogy. There was a famous trapeze artist who was instructing his students how to perform on the high trapeze bar. And one student looked up at the insecure perch upon which he was to perform and was suddenly filled with fear. And he froze completely. He had a terrifying vision of himself falling to the ground. He couldn't move a muscle. He was so frightened. He said, I can't do it. I can't do it. So the instructor said, okay, here's what you do. Throw your heart over the bar and your body will follow. And the term throw your heart over the bar means to throw your faith over your difficulty, throw your affirmation over every barrier, throw your visualization over your obstacles. In other words, throw the spiritual essence of yourself over the bar and your material self will follow in the groove of the victory of your mental thought. So expect the best, not the worst, and you'll attain your heart's desire. So I kind of like this analogy because I feel like sometimes in direct response, we're sort of on that high trapeze bar, and it was very simply how to, shift from fear into seeing yourself as being successful. And the last thing I'll say is he made a practice of whenever he walked by somebody, and you can take this in the context of a conference, but also if you're just walking by anybody, that he would pray for everybody he walked by. And I thought that was such a nice thing. You don't have to talk, if you have a great conversation like Chris was talking about, wonderful. But you can just practice the idea of blessing everyone to whom you pass. And I just thought that was a great little takeaway.
That's beautiful, Eileen. That's actually very profound too. I think that we talked about this in the very beginning of the program, where, your work ideas bleed into your life ideas, and the power of positive thinking. Of course, it helps you in your business, right? It helps you achieve certain things, but you can pull that into your whole of your life. I think that's a great thing. And also too, giving a blessing to everybody you meet.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
It's easy. It doesn't cost you anything.
Doesn't cost you a thing. Gives them some energy, gives you energy to give energy. So why not? Sean, welcome in. I'm so glad you made it. This is fantastic. We'll leave cleanup for you. Let's see, as we were going around, I think that Caitlin, you were next, and so here you go.
Awesome. So similar to Eileen, the book I chose is also not new. It was first published in 2014. I actually read it on my Kindle and then lost my Kindle on a recent flight. So if you guys can see this, it's Leaders Eat Last. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably read this, sometimes maybe even more than once. But it's an exploration of leadership and organizational culture. Always worth a revisit regardless. The overarching message, it's really that true leadership is about creating a culture of trust and safety and really focusing on the long-term well-being of the team and the organization for a very specific reason. And that's basically sustained business success. He really challenges leaders to rethink their approach and prioritize the human element in the leadership strategies. As we can probably all agree, culture's kind of become a bit of a buzzword in the workplace these past couple of years. There's so many examples of where it's done, poorly or not at all, or, false impressions, all that. And while this can all feel very touchy-feely, Sinek does a really good job of diving into the science of it and the why and the how of the roles of leadership and that culture play, which is really what I was drawn to. It took something that was so almost ethereal and really was like, these are the biological reasons why we act how we act and why our colleagues and our friends and family act how we act. Gross oversimplification, but you get it. He looks at examples of how hormones in human biology really look at the environments and how they affect all of us. It's a great foundation really for how he builds the rest of the book at it. And he looks at basically our personal motivators, which are endorphins and dopamine, social motivators, which are serotonin and oxytocin. Any of you parents out there, oxytocin is the love hormone that, skin to skin, right? It really is like these innate biological needs that we're examining here. And then the bad guy, which is, of course, cortisol. But beyond kind of helping us survive, these hormone, I don't know why I struggle with that word, hormone-driven behavior is also really responsible for creating the basic template for social hierarchy that can really be mapped to the workplace. So endorphins help employees manage stress and stay positive, while dopamine keeps employees motivated by rewarding achievements. Serotonin fosters a sense of pride, significance, and loyalty. Oxytocin builds trust in those strong social connections. So Eileen, your example about, giving everybody you pass a blessing. I mean, that right there, that's our oxytocin. That is our social connection right there. Not only is it that, but it's also reinforcing that serotonin in you, doing something good for somebody else. And then meanwhile, we have cortisol, right, who is stress, anxiety, burnout. And it's really kind of working against the idea of a team environment. And it's kind of leading to this every man for himself mentality. Obviously, he's quick to point out that we aren't really manipulating these hormones, but we're creating an environment in which the right balance of these exists. It's from this jumping off place that he really dives into how our prehistoric wiring, I'm not sure if that's the technical term, but impacts the environments in the workplace, and how because of this, we're all just trying to feel safe, like at the end of the day, both, literally and figuratively, the end of the day. And even though, and I think Chris, to your point, you guys set me up really well, he's really kind of talking about, or we're kind of talking about the workplace. There's so much of it that is really applicable to our everyday lives as well. It's kind of like once you see it, you can't not see it. I just opened my eyes and kind of explained a lot about human behavior, both, mine, my colleagues, my friends, family, like I said, in a way that really clicked for me. I'm not really a nonfiction reader. A friend of mine recommended it and kind of like an offhand comment about us picking up our phones for like those dopamine hits. So I was like, cool, I'll read it. I need something different. And I was so excited reading it. I think everybody was sick of me recommending it to them. So they kind of heard it all from me, and now I'm pushing it out onto you guys. So it's kind of a classic, but still worth a revisit if you haven't read it, or even if you have.
Wonderful.
I have that on my stack, and I haven't read it yet.
That's awesome.
There you go, Greg.
Now he's motivated to do it. That was a great share. And I loved a couple of things that you mentioned. First is kind of this prehistoric nature. I think that in business, we forget that a lot of our jobs is to feed and protect the tribe. And that if you think of it as a tribe that you're taking care of and nurturing, everyone has roles in the tribe, but it's the tribe survival that everybody's working towards, right? The ongoing continuation of the tribe. I also think, you had mentioned the Oxycontin or oxytocin, not Oxycontin.
A little different.
Whole different problem.
Whole different problem. But the skin part, because oftentimes now as professionals, we're working at home and we're in a home environment. I also think you were talking about all of these things about leadership, or all the things that you do, and oftentimes still primarily moms do, to manage the home, right? Everything about managing the home is managing these various conversations with the children and schedules and hormones and feelings, and you're managing all of that. And so actually my wife and I were talking about it last night, and it's great that you brought it up, that the best, as a mom managing a house, you learn all the necessary leadership skills that are needed in the world because you have to lead the household. So I think it's great that it blends into your professional and personal life. It's a wonderful share.
Absolutely.
Greg, you're up.
I'm up. All right. So mine actually has a PDMI connection here. At PDMI East in Miami, I had a wonderful dinner with Jordan Pine. And I told him, this is a book actually I recommended, I think last year during the session. I said, I'm reading Anti-Fragile from Nassim Taleb, who did Black Swan. And he said, oh, if you love him, you have to check out Naval Ravikant. So this is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And he said he's Investor of the Year, maybe 5 years ago, VC of the Year. He's very successful in the tech circles. He's also very balanced and down to earth. He came from genuinely nothing. He grew up in New York City, single mom, and in a rough neighborhood where he had to go to the library every day after school until his mom got out of work, and she would pick him up at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And he said all I had to do was read, so I would just read all day, and he became this lover of reading. And the book is a super easy read, right? It's a lot of just his thoughts, and I'll get into exactly why it's super easy to read in just a second. And it's very philosophical, but practical and business related, right? He's an entrepreneur, and he's an investor in the business world. And I'm going to read some of his quotes and kind of go through some of the things. And the first of his quotes is actually about reading. Two of his quotes are, if they wrote the book about money, don't read it. He thinks people should be giving their information. Why is this such an easy read? He didn't read it. He didn't write it. Somebody else wrote it based on his tweets and his interviews and the free information that he's put out there, right? So he walks the walk. And then the other one about business, on reading rather, is he says, you know that song, You Can't Get Out of Your Head? All thoughts work that way. Be very careful about what you read. And it's just one of those little poignant thoughts, it's a little nagging thing in your head. Other quotes, just to see if maybe this is the right book for you, about life in general. He says there are the big three in life are wealth, health, and happiness. We pursue them in that order, but their importance is in the reverse. And it's absolutely true. And he also defines wisdom as understanding the long-term consequences of your actions. I think that is just such a perfect way of describing it, right? The long-term consequences of your actions. But again, he's very entrepreneurial. He says he believes that there are 7 billion people on Earth, and there should be 7 billion companies. His quote is that you should earn with your mind and not your time. If you are a doctor, you are making a lot of money based on the hours that you are working, but you are still only making money on the hours that you are working. He said, today's technical world, everybody has the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. You can get a global reach. One of his big interviews was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he uses Joe as an example. Like, you are the product, and you can't be replaced. There's no replacement of Joe Rogan. You've made a tremendous amount of money being authentic, being who you are, finding that global audience, and everybody for whatever their little thing is, if they're authentic, you have the potential to do that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And he thinks if you do not own a piece of a business, you will never have true financial freedom. He goes along the lines of, a doctor, very wealthy doctors own the practice. They are not the ones that are actually doing the doctoring, or the lawyers own the practice, not the ones that are always, doing the lawyering. Two other quotes he had. He goes, sharks, this kind of goes what he thinks of business. He said, sharks eat well, but they live a life surrounded by other sharks. Great line. And my advice to younger self, this is actually one of the closing lines of the book. Be exactly who you are. Holding back means staying in bad relationships and bad jobs for years instead of minutes. And I wholeheartedly believe that. So really easy book to read. A lot of it is based on, his tweets and his interviews. So super, super quick to read through, easy for the summer, inspirational, practical, love it.
Love it.
Oh,
I also love you got these little quotes that you can write down and you can look at, you can remind yourself and refresh your memory.
If you look at that Joe Rogan, I keep saying it wrong, Joe Rogan podcast, the top quote, because I just looked at it right before this so I could remember how to pronounce it, his name, was this, I watch this once a year. And it is that kind of, he has that kind of content, just a little bit of a refresher, kind of recenter yourself. It's nice.
Fantastic. Great share. Sean Robertson, you're going to round us out.
Great, thank you. And I'm glad I was able to make it as well. I apologize in advance for any background noise. I'm actually in Newark Liberty Airport right now. So
look at this guy jumping up.
Eileen, I wish we could have said a prayer for that traffic so I could have gotten in front. So my book, and I don't remember if this is a repeat or not. Maybe you can tell me, Chris, if anybody.
It's perfect.
Alchemy. The dark art and curious science of creating magic in brands, business, and life. Rory Sutherland, he is the author, and he's the vice chair of Ogilvy out of the UK. And this is exactly what it sounds like. And there are a couple isms and stories, anecdotes that he shares in the beginning of the book that really captured me. One is, imagine you're in the boardroom and you're being charged, you're a marketer in boardroom, and you're being charged to come up with a product to challenge Coca-Cola, right? You probably say, well, it needs to be a little bit sweeter, better tasting, and we need to be able to mass produce it effectively, and we got to be able to sell it cheaply, right? And then imagine a day later, somebody comes into that same boardroom and they give you something that's more expensive in a smaller can that doesn't taste that great. How would you market that? And there were a number of agencies who had that challenge and opportunity and turned it down because in their product testing and their market testing, there was no position for a brand like that. That brand is Red Bull. And they're now, they're turned over $6 billion annually, right? So there's the summary of the book is there's a lot that we're challenged with that doesn't make sense. And there's, sometimes, and Eileen, I think we were set up perfectly. Sometimes going fast, in order to go fast, you need to go slow. Those of us who study communications, marketing, advertising, we all know the case study of the pet rock. And there's always, positioned as something that was a bit silly, and look how somebody got over on the public and made a bunch of money. But, if we look at Caitlin's book, the idea of the pet rock, there had to be something, there had to be a there there, right? What hormones were released, certainly if your neighbors all had pet rocks, there was a FOMO, but how did they create that? What was the alchemy, the art and the science behind the marketing that actually captured the public's attention, and how that worked? And I know the challenge for all of us is how do we use technology, how do we use the messaging and emotion? Chris, you and I talked about that extensively, both professionally and personally. So I'll admittedly, the book I was going to have with me, and I'm reading this, I'm halfway through it now. The book I just finished reading was How to Build a Car by Adrian Newey, How to Build a Race Car. And he is the designer for Red Bull Racing. So the reference to Red Bull in alchemy and the story of Adrian Newey, he was a champion car designer. And one of my favorite, although I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan, so seeing Red Bull go around so fast has been challenging. But I didn't have that book with me, so I thought I'd reference this one. It's a great book. And he has a couple key takeaways, and I was trying to flag it so I can share. I will tell you there are 10 key takeaways. And these are Rory's rules of alchemy. The opposite of good idea can also be a good idea. Don't design for average. It doesn't pay to be logical if everyone else is being logical. The nature of our attention affects the nature of our experience. A flower is simply a weed with an advertising budget, and there's your pet rock. The problem with logic is that it kills off magic. A good guess, which stands up to observation, is still science. So is a lucky accident. Test counterintuitive things only because no one else will. Solving problems using rationality is like playing golf with only one club. Dare to be trivial. And finally, if there were a logical answer, we would have found it already. And the final thing I will leave you with, and I recommend this for all my summer readers, if you've not purchased one of these, this is my favorite little toy, my favorite little tchotchke for the summer. My wife got this for us, and it's every book. We loan out a lot of books that don't make their way back to our bookshelf. So if you can see that, there's a little seal that I put on here, and it simply says Robertson Family from the Robertson Library. Read it, love it, return it. So make sure you stamp all your books if you want them to make it back to you. But I find as much joy in lending books and actually giving them away as well.
That is fantastic, because giving away a book is giving away your ideas and your thoughts and things that you believe in. It kind of goes back to what Eileen was talking about, where if you have a belief in something and a belief in yourself and you can give that to someone else, giving a book away, Sean, well done you. Well done you, and thanks for making the time for us. We're always better because of you and when you show up. One interesting thing about alchemy is it's this funny little definition of these variety of combinations and ingredients that create something new that wasn't there before. So I would encourage everybody in the spirit of Red Bull to Google called Red Bull Kluge. That's K-L-U-G-E. You've never seen the Red Bull Kluge, you've missed something, because it is an unbelievable visual sequence of pure alchemy. Red Bull Kluge, K-L-U-G-E. It's astonishing to see them go through their various athletic feats one after another as the Red Bull athletes they are. So that was awesome. Thomas, are you coming back or are you gone?
I'm coming back. And I've got some, you guys are trusted sources because the questions are all very much big picture, which means that people trust your reviews and your thoughts. So thank you. Sean, I'm going to need to get that information about where you got those seals because that's something that will go over very well in our house, 100%. All right. So first question, and whoever wants to answer, you don't feel pressured to answer. These are pretty much for everyone. The first question is essentially your desert island book. If you've been banished to a remote uninhabited island and have been granted the opportunity to take one book with you, what is it?
Lonesome Dove.
Pillars of the Earth, Ken Follett.
Oh, love Pillars of the Earth.
Mine's Lonesome Dove, Larry McNurtry.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Sorry.
I
Anyone
would
else?
say Circe, if anybody's read it, set on a deserted island. It feels very apropos.
That was your book last year, correct?
Oh, it might have been. Yeah, it's a great one.
Anyone else?
I would say, and not to get too philosophical, the Bible, so many stories in that. And when I'm ready to go to sleep, I'll do Deuteronomy and do it every time. I start running through that list and I'm out in 5 seconds. So
That's awesome.
Nice. All right. Eileen shared a classic of the self-help inspirational genre. Do any of you have an older book like that you go back to as a touchstone? And if so, what is it?
So I have the one I talked about last year, which was Big Magic. It's just a kind of nice, inspirational, feel good, but not like in a cheesy kind of way. It's really just talking about making the most of everything you have around you and how to seize the moments.
I'd go back to Anti-Fragile. It's the only book I've reread.
Oh, wow.
Right, literally it. And it's actually why I came up in conversation with Jordan Pine. And what's interesting is Naval Ravikant, one of his lines is, "I would rather read the best 100 books over and over and over for the rest of my life. It's not a race to get the most books. You'll absorb it a little bit more every time, which makes me want to go back to some books that I've read in the past."
For me, I would say, and I don't know that it falls into self-help, but it's helped me quite a bit, is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. It's one of my favorite. That's a book, Chris, to the point of giving away books. I've given that away about 5 or 6 different times now. A number of my mentees have received that book. And it's how I parent, how I govern myself in business a lot. There you go. Yeah, that's a classic and one of my favorite books of all time.
Excellent.
Great. To that end, we had a comment come in, someone saying that they read Atomic Habits by James Clear every year. And I believe Atomic Habits has been discussed on one of these 3. Yep, that was you, Carey. That's right.
That was my offering last year.
Yep. Wonderful. Okay, coming from the complete opposite end, what is a book that you've hated?
Oh, I have an answer. Ready? The only book in my life I couldn't wait to get through because it was such a tough slog to read. I swear. I celebrated when I was done with this thing, and because he's clearly like really, really smart, and he just makes up words in the middle of sentences, and it's like I could get through 3 or 4, pages out like a light. But it was the only book I kept thinking about over and over and over after I read it.
That's cool.
Anyone else with a hated book?
I kind of cheat. I read a lot of reviews before I invest in a book. So, I kind of like stack the deck in my favor. But that'd be my advice to anybody who picks a lot of bad books.
Yeah.
And
don't finish it.
You don't
There's no
have
reason to finish
it if you don't need to. The reason I never have read a book that I hated is if it didn't speak to me or I wasn't interested, I just put it aside and pick something else up.
That's the right answer. It's absolutely, people feel this commitment to finish a book. Absolutely not.
Let's hear from the other side of that, Caitlin.
I have to finish it all the way through. And I'll actually, good and bad, right? Like poor Tom listens to me complain about books I hate all the time, but I keep reading. But we did at Cannella a book group where the senior team had to read 1 book every 6 weeks, and they were not my type of books. A lot of them were like negotiation books and just like really, aggressive, like but I got to the end of one that I actually really hated, and I can handle bad plot with good writing, but bad writing kills me. And so it was bad writing on something I didn't like. It was really tedious. But it was funny. I got to the end and I was miserable the whole time. And Greg, kind of like you, I put it down and I was so relieved. And like 3 days later, I'm like, God, I keep thinking about this.
Damn it. Yeah.
And so I do think there is something about, fighting through it. I don't know what this says about me and my personality, but you get to it, and then at the end you're like, oh, maybe I did get something more out of it than I thought, as opposed to like that instant gratification, guilty read thing. So something to think about next time you're really miserable reading. Maybe it's for a purpose.
And then I had a similar, well, I'm similar in that I need to get it through. I mean, it's the difference between, it's like a badge of honor in a way. So, but this goes back decades, and the book is even older. Trinity by Leon Uris, which and the president of the company, the agency I worked at, like insisted I read it, and it's okay, but it's kind of the story of Ireland, where I was going to Ireland the first time, and so, but it was so long, and it was just kind of like, kept asking, am I done? And I'm like, no. Right? So I know I need to get done with it. So yeah, it was, and another one that everybody loved, and again, from the 90s, Bridges of Madison County. I will tell you that I did not care for the book, but Clint Eastwood made, that was one of those few exceptions where the book was, or the movie was so much better than the book. in my opinion. So there.
Bad movies make good books, or bad books make good movies.
Right.
I will forever agree.
That was deep.
Last one before we go. Any books the panelists have on their list for this summer that they haven't read yet? What's atop your list for the summer?
I'll go, keeping on the nonfiction one. Mine is The Anxious Generation. So I'm excited for that one.
Very good. That should be excellent.
I shouldn't say excited. It's not, but yeah.
Very good.
Well, for total fun, I love The Gray Man. I'm almost done with the series, but it's, always a great read.
The at the end of Naval Ravikant's book are 13 books that he recommends you read, and I bought them all. So I'm about halfway through them, and the one that I'm reading now, which is the movie Arrival, is based on a short story in a book called Stories of Your Life. So light reading, easier, but it's really good.
I'm reading
Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Chris. Or no, I was going to say I will up the ante on light reading and go with Andrew McCarthy's Brats, because I love all things Brat Pack and Gen X. So the documentary comes out tomorrow. I'm very excited, but I got the book on the Kindle and never read it. So once I do that, I'll learn even more about all those people that I know too much about. People magazine.
So one of my favorite books that I've read in the last 10 years is called A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Tolls. They have they've got a Netflix series on it now. I read that book twice within the span of 2 years, especially during the pandemic. If you haven't read it, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's one of the most beautiful stories about, Eileen, to your point about the idea of positive thinking about where you are in an environment. Beautifully written, and he's written a book called Dinner for Two, and it's a collection of short stories, and he's a marvelous writer. So that's a real summer book.
I have one other really quick, besides Story of Your Life, another book you'd recommended was called Sapiens. It's about the history of humankind.
That is awesome.
Right? It's like you would think it's the driest content ever, and it's a page turner. Like, it is ridiculously good. There's a one line I keep thinking of over and over and over. I just read it a couple of days ago, this line. How did money succeed where gods and kings failed? And it was just like one of those, like, it's like a deep, really well done book. And it starts with Neanderthals. Like, it's crazy good.
I totally agree with Greg. And on the money side, he was so interesting. He said, in all cultures, in all religions, for all time since it began, money is the only thing that we all believe in. Everybody believes that the dollar means something.
Right.
Even if you have different gods and different belief structures, we all believe in money.
It's always the dollars. Yeah. And he's got great stories that explain it. Not just explain it, but like drive that home. You're like, oh my God, he's right. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's brilliant. Sapiens is a great read.
Yep.
Well, to the point that was made earlier, wealth, health, and happiness, and we're focused on the wrong one first.
Right.
I will say during my running, I am listening to Leaders Eat Last currently. Thank you, Caitlin. And the book I'm looking forward to reading this summer is The Last of His Kind. It's about Clayton Kershaw, the pitcher for the Dodgers. It's written by a sports writer named Andy McCullough, who is far more than a sports writer, a tremendous, wonderful writer. And this is his first full speed book. I cannot wait to read it. So thank you all. Just amazing content from everybody. I hope that the people out there got a lot out of it. I feel like they did. So thank you again for one of our best episodes, and happy summer, everybody. Our next Take 20 episode is set for Wednesday, the 26th of June, when we'll sneak a pre-Q3 look at the media landscape as we head into the teeth of Olympics and election advertising season. Please visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to register for the webinar and check out the upcoming schedule. And online registration continues for PDMI West, October 7th through 9th at Hard Rock Hotel San Diego. Our Early Bird special pricing on badges for the event expires Friday, June 14th at the end of the day. Those Early Bird badges are priced at just $295 for PDMI members and $495 for non-members. So jump on that now if you know you're coming. It's a chance to save $100 a badge. Thanks again for checking out this episode of the PDMI's Take 20. Again, happy summer. Be well. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.